Maya Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she climbed the steps to the Morrison mansion for what felt like the 100th time. The early morning sun was already beating down, and she knew it was going to be another long day. At 19, Maya had calluses on her hands that told the story of too many hours scrubbing floors, washing dishes, and cleaning windows in the fancy houses of Brookside neighborhood. 3 years ago, everything was different. Maya remembered singing in her high school choir, dreaming of music school, and believing that her voice might actually take her somewhere. Her parents always said she had a gift. Her mother would smile and say Maya's voice could make angels cry. But that was before the accident. Before everything changed in a single terrible moment on a rainy Tuesday night. Now Maya's days started at 5 in the morning and ended long after sunset. She cleaned houses for Mrs. Patterson on Mondays, the Johnson family on Tuesdays, and the Morrisons on Wednesdays through Fridays. On weekends, she worked at a small grocery store, stocking shelves and counting every penny. Her younger brother Carlos was 16 now, and keeping him in school was all that mattered. His grades were good, and Maya was determined that he would get the chances she never had. The Morrison house always made Maya feel small. It wasn't just the size, though it was huge with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. It was the way everything inside seemed to whisper about a life she could never have. Mrs. Morrison was kind enough, always polite and never rude like some of the other families Maya worked for. But there was still that invisible line between them, the one that said Maya belonged with the mop and bucket, not sitting at the dinner table. Today felt different somehow. Mrs. Morrison seemed more excited than usual, talking on the phone in rapid bursts about flowers and photographers and guest lists. Maya had learned to tune out these conversations. Rich people problems weren't her problems. She had her own worries, like the fact that Carlos needed new shoes and their rent was going up next month. Maya was dusting the living room when she saw it. The grand piano sat in the corner like a sleeping giant, its black surface so shiny she could see her reflection. She'd been cleaning around it for months, always careful not to touch the keys. Pianos were expensive, delicate things that didn't belong to people like her. But today, something pulled her toward it. She looked around to make sure Mrs. Morrison was still busy with her phone calls. The house felt empty except for the distant sound of conversation from the kitchen. Maya's fingers hovered over the keys. She hadn't touched a piano in 3 years. Not since the music room at school, where she used to practice during lunch breaks. One finger pressed down on middle C. The sound filled the room, pure and clean. Maya's heart jumped, but nothing happened. No alarms went off. Mrs. Morrison didn't come running. Maya pressed another key, then another. Before she knew it, her hands were moving across the keyboard, finding the melody she'd carried in her heart all these years. The song that came out wasn't fancy or complicated. It was a simple lullaby her mother used to sing, first in English, then in Spanish. Duérmete, mi niña, duérmete, mi amor. The words flowed out of Maya's mouth before she could stop them. This was the song her mother sang when Maya couldn't sleep, when storms scared her, when the world felt too big and frightening. Maya's voice grew stronger as she played. For a few precious minutes, she wasn't the girl who scrubbed toilets and counted coins. She was just Maya, the girl who could sing, the girl her parents believed in. The music filled the empty spaces in her chest, the ones that had been hollow since the accident. She was so lost in the song that she didn't hear the footsteps, didn't notice Mrs. Morrison standing in the doorway, her phone forgotten in her hand. Maya only realized she wasn't alone when she finished the last note and heard someone crying. Maya spun around, her face burning with embarrassment. Mrs. Morrison was standing there with tears streaming down her cheeks, looking at Maya like she'd never seen her before. "I'm sorry," Maya stammered, jumping up from the piano bench. "I shouldn't have touched it. I was just dusting and I—" "Don't apologize," Mrs. Morrison said, her voice shaky. "That was beautiful. Where did you learn to sing like that?" Maya's hands twisted together. "My mother taught me, but I shouldn't have been playing your piano. I know better than that." Mrs. Morrison walked closer, still wiping her eyes. "Maya, honey, how long have you been able to sing like that?" "I don't know. Since I was little, I guess." Maya felt smaller with each word. "I used to be in the school choir, but that was a long time ago." Why did you stop? The question hung in the air between them. Maya could have given a dozen answers. No time, no money, no point. But what came out was simpler and more honest than she meant it to be. Life got in the way. Mrs. Morrison nodded like she understood. Maya, I have something to ask you, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. Maya's stomach dropped. Was she getting fired? Had she crossed some line she didn't even know existed? My daughter Jennifer is getting married in 2 weeks. Right here in the garden. We've planned everything perfectly, but... Mrs. Morrison paused, looking at Maya with an expression she couldn't read. We haven't found the right person to sing during the ceremony. Jennifer wanted something special, something that would make people feel the love, you know? And what I just heard, Maya, that's exactly what we need. Maya stared at her. I don't understand. I want you to sing at the wedding, not as the help, but as our musician. Our special guest. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Maya felt like she was falling, even though her feet were still on the ground. Mrs. Morrison, I can't. I don't have anything to wear to a wedding like that. And all those people, they're not like me. What do you mean, not like you? Maya gestured around the room, at the expensive furniture and art on the walls. They have money. They went to fancy schools. They belong here. I clean houses. Mrs. Morrison's expression softened. Maya, talent doesn't care about money or schools. What you just did, what I just heard, that's a gift. It would be wrong to waste it. But I don't know anything about wedding music. I don't know what rich people want to hear. They want to hear exactly what I just heard. Something real. Something that comes from the heart. Mrs. Morrison moved closer. Maya, I've been to 100 weddings. I've heard professional singers who cost thousands of dollars. None of them made me feel what you just made me feel in 3 minutes. Maya's mind was racing. A real wedding. Singing for real people who weren't forced to listen because they were stuck in a school assembly. It sounded impossible and terrifying and wonderful all at the same time. I couldn't afford to take time off from my other jobs, Maya said quietly. I have to work. I'll pay you, Mrs. Morrison said immediately. More than you'd make in a week of cleaning. And we'll get you a beautiful dress, everything you need. Maya felt tears building behind her eyes. This woman, who barely knew her, was offering her something that felt like a dream. But dreams were dangerous things. Dreams were what got broken when cars skidded on wet roads and parents didn't come home. Why? Maya whispered. Why would you do this for me? Mrs. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Because 25 years ago I was young and scared and someone gave me a chance I didn't think I deserved. It changed my life. Maybe it's time I passed that forward. Maya looked at the piano, then back at Mrs. Morrison. Carlos always said she was too afraid of everything. Too afraid to dream. Too afraid to hope. Too afraid to believe that good things could happen to people like them. Maybe he was right. Maybe she'd been so busy surviving that she'd forgotten how to live. Okay, Maya said, the word barely a whisper. I'll do it. Mrs. Morrison's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Really? But I'm terrified. Good, Mrs. Morrison said with a smile. That means it matters. As Maya gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, she felt something shift inside her chest. It was small and fragile like a candle flame in the wind, but it was there. For the first time in 3 years, Maya Rodriguez had something to look forward to. Something that wasn't about bills or work or just getting through another day. Walking home that afternoon, Maya found herself humming the lullaby again. And for once, she didn't stop herself. The next morning, Maya woke up wondering if the whole thing had been a dream. But when she checked her phone, there was a text from Mrs. Morrison asking if she could meet at the mall at 10 in the morning. Maya stared at the message for a full minute before it really hit her. This was actually happening, she told Carlos over breakfast, watching his eyes get wider with each word. Her brother nearly choked on his cereal when she got to the part about singing at a rich person's wedding. Are you serious right now? Carlos asked, putting down his spoon. Maya, this is huge. This could change everything for us. Or it could be a disaster, Maya said, stirring her coffee nervously. What if I mess up? What if I embarrass myself in front of all those people? Carlos reached across their tiny kitchen table and grabbed her hand. Listen to me. You're the best singer I've ever heard, and I'm not just saying that because you're my sister. Remember when you used to sing me to sleep after Mom and Dad died? Your voice was the only thing that made me stop crying. Maya felt her throat tighten. Those first few months after the accident had been the hardest time of both their lives. Carlos had nightmares every night, and Maya barely knew how to take care of herself, let alone a 13-year-old boy. But somehow they'd made it through together. That was different, Maya said. That was just you and me. This is going to be hundreds of people I don't know judging everything about me. They're not going to be judging you, Carlos said. They're going to be listening to you. There's a difference. An hour later, Maya stood outside the entrance to Brookside Mall, feeling completely out of place. She'd been here before, but only to work at the food court during busy seasons. She'd never been here to actually shop for herself. Mrs. Morrison waved from across the parking lot. Looking elegant even in casual clothes, Maya, honey, you look nervous, Mrs. Morrison said as they walked toward the department store. Are you having second thoughts? Maybe a few, Maya admitted. I've never done anything like this before. Well, that makes two of us. I've never discovered someone singing in my living room before either. They spent the next 3 hours in what felt like a different world. The dress section at Nordstrom was bigger than Maya's entire apartment. Mrs. Morrison pulled dress after dress from the racks, holding them up against Maya and making thoughtful sounds. This one, Mrs. Morrison said finally, holding up a deep blue dress that seemed to shimmer in the store lights. This is perfect for you. Maya looked at the price tag and felt dizzy. Mrs. Morrison, this costs more than I make in a month. Don't worry about that. This is my gift to you. Mrs. Morrison ushered Maya toward the dressing room. Besides, you're going to earn every penny of this when you make my daughter's wedding unforgettable. In the small dressing room, Maya stared at herself in the mirror. The dress fit like it had been made for her, bringing out the warm brown of her eyes and making her look older, more sophisticated. For a moment, she could almost imagine herself belonging in Mrs. Morrison's world, but then reality crept back in. What if everyone could tell she didn't belong? What if they looked at her and saw exactly what she was? A girl who cleaned their houses and couldn't afford her own groceries some weeks. Maya, let me see, Mrs. Morrison called from outside. Maya stepped out, feeling self-conscious. Mrs. Morrison's face lit up immediately. Oh my goodness, you look absolutely beautiful. Maya, you have to see yourself. Mrs. Morrison led her to a three-way mirror, and Maya barely recognized the person looking back at her. She looked confident. She looked like someone who belonged at fancy weddings. I don't look like me, Maya said softly. You look exactly like you, Mrs. Morrison corrected. You just look like the version of you that believes in herself. After the dress came shoes that didn't hurt her feet for once, and a small purse that Mrs. Morrison insisted she needed. Maya felt overwhelmed by the kindness, but also guilty. This woman was spending so much money on her, and Maya wasn't even sure she could deliver what was expected. The next stop was even more intimidating. Mrs. Morrison had arranged for Maya to meet with Patricia Williams, a vocal coach who worked with professional singers downtown. Maya sat in the elegant studio, surrounded by photos of famous musicians, feeling smaller by the minute. Patricia was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and perfect posture. She listened to Maya sing the same lullaby that had started this whole thing, nodding along and making notes on a pad. You have a naturally beautiful instrument, Patricia said when Maya finished, but we need to work on your breathing and projection. In a large outdoor space, you'll need to make sure everyone can hear you clearly. For the next week, Maya found herself in a completely new routine. Instead of rushing from one cleaning job to another, she spent her mornings at Patricia's studio, learning about diaphragmatic breathing and vocal warm-ups. It was the first time in years that Maya felt like she was actually learning something, growing instead of just surviving. But the lessons were harder than she expected. Patricia was patient but demanding, making Maya repeat phrases over and over until they were perfect. Some days, Maya left the studio feeling worse about her voice than when she arrived. Maybe I'm not as good as everyone thinks, Maya confessed to Carlos one evening. They were sitting on their small balcony, sharing a pizza they'd splurged on with the money Mrs. Morrison had advanced her. What do you mean? Carlos asked. Patricia keeps correcting me. She says I need to project more, breathe differently, stand straighter. Maybe I'm just a girl who can carry a tune, not someone who should be singing at weddings. Carlos was quiet for a moment. Maya, do you remember when I first started playing basketball? You were terrible, Maya said with a small smile. Exactly. Coach Williams made me run drills for hours, correcting my form, making me practice the same shot 100 times. Did that mean I wasn't meant to play basketball? No, it meant you were getting better. Right, and now I'm starting point guard. Carlos nudged her shoulder. Patricia isn't correcting you because you're bad. She's correcting you because she sees how good you could be. That helped, but Maya's biggest challenge wasn't the technical stuff. It was the song choice. Mrs. Morrison had asked her to pick something meaningful, something that would touch people's hearts. Maya had immediately thought of Ave Maria, a song her mother used to hum while cooking dinner. But practicing it brought back so many memories. Maya found herself crying halfway through rehearsals, thinking about her parents and how proud they would have been to see her singing at a real wedding. Patricia noticed the emotional weight of the song and suggested Maya lean into it instead of fighting it. The best performances come from truth, Patricia explained. If this song means something to you, let people feel that. Don't hide from the emotion. Maya decided to sing part of it in Spanish, the way her mother had taught her. It felt like honoring her family's memory while also sharing a piece of herself with people who might never have heard a song in her language. The hardest part came 3 days before the wedding. Mrs. Morrison arranged for Maya to visit the venue for a sound check. The Rosewood Country Club was even fancier than the Morrison house. Maya stood at the edge of the outdoor pavilion where the ceremony would take place, looking at the rows of white chairs and the altar decorated with more flowers than she'd ever seen in one place. It's bigger than I thought, Maya whispered to Mrs. Morrison. It looks scarier when it's empty, Mrs. Morrison assured her. When it's full of people celebrating love, it feels completely different. But Maya couldn't stop imagining those chairs filled with people in expensive clothes, people who would wonder who she was and why she was there. She practiced her song 3 times, and each time her voice sounded smaller in the vast space. That night, Maya barely slept. She kept running through worst-case scenarios in her head. What if she forgot the words? What if her voice cracked? What if everyone could tell she was just pretending to belong there? At 2 in the morning, she almost called Mrs. Morrison to back out. She had the number pulled up on her phone, her finger hovering over the call button. But then she thought about Carlos, about how proud he'd been when she told him about the opportunity. She thought about Patricia, who'd spent hours helping her improve. Most of all, she thought about her parents and the dreams they'd had for her. Maya put the phone down and went to her small keyboard, the one her parents had bought her for her 16th birthday. She played Ave Maria softly, so she wouldn't wake Carlos, and sang it the way her mother had taught her. Not perfectly, not professionally, but with all the love in her heart. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. And maybe, just maybe, being ready wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about being brave enough to try. For the first time all week, Maya fell asleep peacefully, dreaming about music instead of mistakes. The morning of the wedding, Maya woke up to her alarm at 6, even though she'd barely slept. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her phone to turn off the buzzer. Today was the day. In just 8 hours, she would be standing in front of 300 strangers, singing the most important song of her life. Carlos was already awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee ready. He'd taken the day off from his weekend job at the grocery store to be there for Maya, even though they needed the money. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sliding a cup toward her. "Like I'm going to throw up," Maya said honestly, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Carlos, what if I mess this up? What if I forget the words or my voice cracks or—" "Stop," Carlos said firmly. "You've practiced this song 100 times. You know it better than your own name. And even if something goes wrong, so what? You'll still be the girl who was brave enough to try." Maya tried to eat some toast, but her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies having a dance party. She kept checking the time, watching the minutes crawl by until she needed to get ready. Mrs. Morrison had arranged for someone to do Maya's hair and makeup at 10, which felt both exciting and terrifying. At 9:30, Maya stood in front of her tiny bathroom mirror, looking at the girl staring back at her. In a few hours, that same girl would be wearing an expensive dress and singing for people who probably spent more on dinner than Maya made in a week. The thought made her dizzy. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You can do this." The hair and makeup artist, Lisa, arrived right on time at the Morrison house. Maya had never had professional makeup done before, and she watched in amazement as Lisa transformed her face with brushes and powders. Her hair, usually pulled back in a simple ponytail, was styled into soft waves that made her look older and more sophisticated. "You're going to be beautiful up there," Lisa said, putting the finishing touches on Maya's lipstick. "Mrs. Morrison told me about your voice. She said you made her cry just practicing in the living room." "That's what I'm afraid of," Maya said. "What if I make everyone cry for the wrong reasons?" "Honey, in my line of work, I see a lot of performers. The ones who are worried about doing well, those are usually the ones who do amazing. It's the cocky ones you have to watch out for." When Maya finally saw herself in the full-length mirror, she couldn't believe it was really her. The blue dress fit perfectly, the makeup made her eyes look bright and confident, and her hair looked like something from a magazine. For the first time since this whole thing started, Maya actually felt like she might belong at a fancy wedding. But that feeling didn't last long. When they arrived at the Rosewood Country Club, Maya's confidence disappeared faster than ice cream on a hot day. The place was even more overwhelming than she remembered. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows, facing an altar that looked like something from a fairy tale. Hundreds of white roses and baby's breath covered every surface, and crystal chandeliers hung from the tent ceiling, even though it was still daylight. Maya watched from a side entrance as guests began arriving. The women wore dresses that probably cost more than Maya's rent, and their jewelry caught the light like tiny stars. The men looked comfortable and confident in their expensive suits, laughing and shaking hands like they'd known each other forever. This was their world, and Maya felt like an alien who'd accidentally landed on the wrong planet. "They're just people," Mrs. Morrison said, appearing beside Maya. "I know they look intimidating, but they're just people celebrating love. That's what you're here for, remember? To help them celebrate? What if they don't like me?" Maya asked, watching a group of women in designer dresses taking selfies near the flower arrangements. "Maya, listen to me," Mrs. Morrison said, turning to face her. "In 30 minutes, none of that will matter. When you start singing, they won't see your background or your bank account. They'll just hear your heart. That's what music does. It makes everything else disappear." Maya nodded, trying to believe it. She practiced her breathing exercises while she waited, the way Patricia had taught her. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 8. It helped a little, but her hands were still trembling. At exactly 2 o'clock, the wedding processional began. Maya watched from behind the altar as the bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their pale pink dresses, followed by the flower girl, who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Then the bride appeared, looking absolutely radiant in a dress that seemed to float rather than touch the ground. Maya's moment was coming. According to the program, she would sing right after the opening remarks during the Unity Candle ceremony. Her heart was beating so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. The officiant, a distinguished man with silver hair, began the ceremony with words about love and commitment. Maya tried to focus on what he was saying, but all she could think about was the fact that in less than 5 minutes, every eye in this place would be on her. At this time, the officiant announced, the bride and groom would like to share a special musical selection, performed by Maya Rodriguez. Maya felt like she was moving through water as she walked to the front of the ceremony area. The guests' faces turned toward her, and she could see some of them exchanging curious looks. Who was this girl? Why hadn't they heard of her before? Maya's face burned with embarrassment. She reached the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces staring back at her. For a terrifying moment, her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember the first words of the song. She couldn't remember why she was there. All she could see were 300 strangers waiting for her to either impress them or fail spectacularly. Then, somewhere in the crowd, she spotted Carlos. He was sitting in the back row wearing his one good shirt and tie, giving her a thumbs up and the biggest smile she'd ever seen. Suddenly, Maya remembered what this was really about. It wasn't about impressing rich people or proving she belonged somewhere. It was about sharing something beautiful, something that came from her heart. Maya closed her eyes for just a moment and thought about her mother. She could almost hear her voice saying, "Mija, your voice is a gift. Don't keep it to yourself." When Maya opened her eyes and began to sing, something magical happened. The first notes of Ave Maria came out pure and strong, carrying across the outdoor pavilion like they had wings. Maya felt her nervousness melt away as the music took over. "Ave Maria, gratia plena," she sang, her voice growing more confident with each word. She'd decided to start with the Latin version, the one that felt most traditional and wedding appropriate. But as she moved into the English verses, Maya felt something shift inside her. The guests, who had been politely attentive at first, became completely still. Maya could see people leaning forward in their chairs, caught up in the emotion of the song. Some of the women were already reaching for tissues, and even some of the men looked like they were fighting back tears. When Maya transitioned into the Spanish verses, the way her mother had taught her, her voice soared with emotion she didn't even know she had. "Santa Maria, Madre de Dios," she sang, putting every ounce of love and loss and hope she'd carried for the past 3 years into those words. The bride was crying openly now, holding her bouquet with one hand and her groom's hand with the other. The groom wasn't doing much better, his eyes bright with unshed tears as he watched his new wife's reaction to the music. Maya sang the final notes with her eyes closed, pouring everything she had into the last Ave Maria. When the song ended, the silence stretched for what felt like forever. Maya opened her eyes, terrified that she'd done something wrong. Then the applause started. It began with one person, then another. Then suddenly everyone was on their feet, clapping and wiping their eyes. Maya stood frozen at the microphone, overwhelmed by the response. She'd never experienced anything like this before. 300 people moved to tears by something she had created. As Maya walked back to her place, her legs shaky with adrenaline, she caught sight of Mrs. Morrison in the front row. The woman who had given her this chance was sobbing openly, her hands pressed to her heart. Maya realized that she'd just experienced something she would remember for the rest of her life, the moment when her voice found its purpose. The applause seemed to go on forever. Maya stood frozen, not knowing what to do with her hands or where to look. She'd never been the center of attention like this before, and certainly not in front of 300 people who were all staring directly at her. Her heart was still racing from the performance, but now it was racing for a completely different reason. As the clapping finally started to die down, Maya tried to slip quietly back to her seat in the far corner where Mrs. Morrison had arranged for her to watch the rest of the ceremony. She wanted to disappear, to become invisible again like she always had been. But before she could take more than a few steps, she felt a gentle hand on her arm. It was the bride, Jennifer, still in her beautiful white dress with tears streaming down her face. Maya panicked for a moment, thinking she'd somehow ruined the wedding by making the bride cry on her special day. "I'm so sorry," Maya started to say. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't you dare apologize," Jennifer said, her voice shaky with emotion. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. You just made our ceremony perfect." She squeezed Maya's hand. "Thank you for giving us something we'll remember forever." Maya felt her own eyes filling with tears. She'd been so worried about messing up that she hadn't even considered the possibility that she might actually make someone's day better. Before she could respond, the groom appeared beside his new wife, his eyes red with emotion. "Maya, right?" he said, extending his hand. "I'm David. I just wanted to say, wow. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. That was incredible." Maya shook his hand, still not quite believing this was really happening. "Thank you. I was so nervous I thought I might pass out up there." "Well, you couldn't tell," Jennifer said. "You looked like you belonged on a concert stage. Have you ever thought about pursuing music professionally?" The question hit Maya like a bolt of lightning. Professional music? That was something that happened to other people, people with money and connections and formal training. Not girls who cleaned houses and worried about paying rent. I don't know, Maya stammered. I never really thought about it being possible. Well, you should start thinking about it, David said seriously. Because what you just did up there, that's not something you can teach. That comes from somewhere deeper. As the bride and groom moved away to greet their other guests, Maya felt someone else approaching. She turned to see a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit walking toward her with purpose. "Excuse me, are you the young lady who just performed?" he asked with a warm smile. "Yes, sir," Maya said, suddenly feeling very young and out of place again. "My name is Robert Chen. I'm a music producer here in the city." He handed her a business card that felt heavier than regular paper. "I've been in this business for 25 years, and I haven't heard a voice like yours in, well, maybe ever." Maya stared at the card, not quite processing what she was reading. "A music producer? I work with artists, help them develop their careers, get them recording contracts. And Maya, it is Maya, right? You have something special. Something that can't be manufactured or taught." Robert paused, studying her face. "Have you ever been in a recording studio?" "No, sir. I just sing around the house mostly. And I was in high school choir, but that was different. I'd like to change that. Would you be interested in coming to my studio next week? Just to see what it's like, maybe record a demo. No pressure, no commitment. I just think the world needs to hear what you can do." Maya felt dizzy. A recording studio, a demo? These were words from a completely different universe, one where dreams actually came true. She thought about Carlos, about their tiny apartment, about all the bills waiting at home. "I don't know if I can afford," she started to say. "No cost to you," Robert interrupted. "Consider it an investment in talent. Here's my card. Think about it and give me a call." As Robert walked away, Maya stood holding his business card like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. She looked around for Mrs. Morrison, needing to tell someone what had just happened, but before she could find her, another person approached. This time, it was an elegant woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "My dear, I'm Catherine Williams. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Robert. He's absolutely right, you know. You have a gift." "Thank you," Maya said, still feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. "I run a foundation that provides scholarships for young artists," Catherine continued. "We help talented individuals get the training and education they need to pursue their dreams. Would you be interested in learning more about that?" Maya felt like she was dreaming. First a music producer, now someone talking about scholarships and education? This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I don't have a high school diploma," Maya admitted, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I had to drop out to work when my parents died." Catherine's expression softened immediately. "Oh, my dear, that must have been so difficult for you. But you know what? Some of the most successful artists I know didn't follow traditional paths. We have programs that can help with that too, if you're interested." Before Maya could respond, she felt familiar arms wrap around her from behind. She turned to see Carlos, grinning so wide she thought his face might split in half. "Maya, that was amazing!" "I was crying, and you know I never cry." He looked at Catherine apologetically. "Sorry, I'm her brother Carlos. No need to apologize," Catherine said warmly. "You should be very proud of your sister. She's extraordinarily talented." "I know," Carlos said simply. "I've been telling her that for years." As Catherine handed Maya her card and walked away, Carlos grabbed his sister's hands, practically bouncing with excitement. "Maya, do you realize what just happened? You didn't just sing at a wedding. You blew everyone's minds. I saw people in the audience taking videos. Some lady in the third row was on her phone the whole time, probably posting it online already." The thought of strangers posting videos of her singing online made Maya feel sick to her stomach. "Carlos, what if what? What if people see how talented you are? What if this changes everything for us?" Carlos shook his head. "Maya, you've been so scared of dreaming big that you almost missed your chance. But it's happening whether you're ready or not." As if to prove his point, Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. She pulled it out of her purse with shaking hands. The messages were from numbers she didn't recognize. People asking if she was available for other weddings. Someone wanting to know if she gave voice lessons. Another person asking about booking her for a corporate event. How did they get my number? Maya asked, staring at her phone in bewilderment. Mrs. Morrison probably gave it to a few people, Carlos said, reading over her shoulder. Maya, look at this. People want to hire you. They want to pay you to sing. Maya sat down heavily in one of the wedding chairs, her legs suddenly feeling like jelly. Everything was happening so fast. This morning she was just Maya, the girl who cleaned houses and sang in the shower. Now, strangers were offering her opportunities she'd never even dared to imagine. I don't know how to do any of this, she said quietly. I don't know about music business or recording studios or any of it. What if I mess it up? Carlos sat down beside her, his expression growing serious. Maya, remember what Dad used to say? You don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. Maya felt tears building behind her eyes. Their father had always been full of sayings like that, little pieces of wisdom that seemed simple but meant everything. She missed him so much in moments like this, when life felt too big and complicated to handle alone. What would they think? Maya whispered. Mom and Dad, about all this. Are you kidding me? Carlos said, his voice thick with emotion. They'd be so proud they'd probably cry harder than that bride did. Maya, they always knew you were special. They just didn't get to see you realize it. Maya looked around at the wedding reception that was now in full swing. People were laughing and dancing, celebrating love and new beginnings. And somehow her voice had been part of that celebration. She'd helped make this day special for people she'd never met before. Maybe Carlos was right. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid of what could go wrong and start being excited about what could go right. Maya pulled out Robert Chen's business card and stared at it again. For the first time in 3 years, Maya Rodriguez wasn't just surviving. She was dreaming. 3 months later, Maya sat in a recording studio that still felt like something from a dream. The walls were covered with gold and platinum records from artists she'd only heard on the radio, and the equipment looked like it belonged on a spaceship. But what amazed her most was how natural it felt to be there now, like she'd found the place where she was always meant to be. Robert Chen had been true to his word. The week after the wedding, Maya had nervously walked into his studio for what he called a casual session. Nothing casual about it felt casual to Maya. She'd never seen microphones that cost more than her monthly rent or mixing, boards with more buttons than she could count. But when she started singing, all of that faded away. The demo they recorded that day changed everything. Robert had suggested she sing Ave Maria the same way she'd performed it at the wedding, mixing English, Latin, and Spanish in a way that told her own story. When they played it back, Maya barely recognized her own voice. It sounded professional, polished, but somehow still completely authentic. This is what we're going to send to the record labels, Robert had told her, and Maya's stomach had done about 17 somersaults. Now, 3 months later, that demo had turned into something Maya never could have imagined. 4 different record labels had wanted to sign her, and after long discussions with Robert and a lawyer he'd recommended, Maya had chosen Harmony Records. They understood her story and promised to let her stay true to her roots while helping her reach a bigger audience. The advance money from the contract had been more than Maya had seen in her entire life. The first thing she'd done was pay off all their bills and put Carlos through his last 2 years of high school at a private school where he could focus on his studies instead of worrying about money. The second thing she'd done was move them out of their tiny apartment into a small house with an actual yard and a piano in the living room. But the biggest change wasn't the money or the house. It was how Maya felt about herself. For the first time since her parents died, she woke up excited about the future instead of just hoping to survive another day. The studio door opened, and Robert walked in with a huge smile on his face. Maya, I just got off the phone with the radio promotions team. Your single officially goes to radio next Monday. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Her single. Those words still sounded impossible. Really? People are actually going to hear it on the radio? Not just people, Robert said, sitting down next to her. We're looking at over 200 stations nationwide for the first week. Maya, this is really happening. The single was Ave Maria, recorded almost exactly the way she'd sung it at the wedding. The only difference was a subtle instrumental arrangement that Robert's team had added, making it sound fuller without covering up Maya's voice. When Maya first heard the finished version, she'd cried for 20 minutes straight. "What if people don't like it?" Maya asked, the same fear that still visited her late at night. "Maya, we've been through this," Robert said gently. "The video from the wedding has 12 million views now. 12 million people have watched you sing, and the comments are incredible. People are calling it the most beautiful wedding performance they've ever seen." Maya still couldn't believe that number. 12 million people. She'd grown up in a world where getting 100 likes on social media felt like a big deal. Now strangers from around the world were commenting on her video, sharing their own stories about songs that had touched their hearts, and asking when they could hear more of her music. The fame part was still hard to get used to. Last week, Maya had been recognized at the grocery store for the first time. A young mother had approached her, saying she'd played Maya's wedding video for her daughter every night before bed. Maya had signed an autograph on the back of a receipt, feeling surreal about the whole experience. But the best part wasn't the recognition or the money. It was getting to make music every day. Maya worked with songwriters now, learning how to craft melodies and tell stories through lyrics. She was taking vocal lessons with Patricia again, but now it felt different. Instead of preparing for one performance, she was building a career. The recording studio had become Maya's second home. She loved the process of layering vocals, of hearing how different instruments could change the mood of a song, of working with producers who understood her vision. Some days, she'd spend 8 hours in the studio and feel like only minutes had passed. Carlos had adapted to their new life better than Maya had expected. He was thriving at his new school, making friends and getting grades that would definitely get him into college. But the best part was that he wasn't worried anymore. Maya could see it in the way he carried himself, how he smiled more freely, how he talked about the future like it was something to look forward to instead of something to fear. "You know what the craziest part is?" Carlos had told her just last week. "People at school know my sister is famous, but that's not why I'm happy. I'm happy because you're happy again. You're the Maya I remember from before everything went wrong." Maya was working on a full album now, writing songs that told her story and the stories of people like her. There was one about her parents, another about the night she almost gave up on everything, and several about finding hope in unexpected places. But her favorite was a song she'd written for Carlos, about the little brother who'd kept her going when she wanted to quit. The album was scheduled to come out in 6 months, and Maya was both terrified and excited. Robert kept telling her that the industry was buzzing about her, that radio programmers and music journalists were calling her the voice of a generation. Maya didn't know about all that, but she knew that when she sang now, it felt like she was exactly where she belonged. There were other opportunities, too, things Maya was still learning to navigate. Catherine Williams had been true to her word about the Scholarship Foundation, and Maya was now their youngest spokesperson. She traveled to schools in low-income neighborhoods, talking to kids about following their dreams even when life felt impossible. Those visits were some of the most meaningful parts of her new life. Wedding bookings were still coming in too, though Maya was more selective now. She only said yes to ceremonies that felt special to her, weddings where she knew her voice could add something meaningful to the celebration. Each performance reminded her of where this journey had started, and she never took that for granted. Maya had also started a small scholarship fund of her own, specifically for kids who'd lost parents and were struggling to stay in school. She remembered how close she'd come to giving up on everything, and she wanted to make sure other kids had opportunities she almost missed. The biggest surprise had been hearing from other singers who'd seen her wedding video. Established artists were reaching out, wanting to collaborate or just to tell her how much her story had inspired them. Maya had met musicians she'd only dreamed of meeting, and most of them were just regular people who happened to be incredibly talented. But through all the changes, Maya tried to stay connected to who she was before any of this happened. She still lived in the same neighborhood where she'd grown up, just in a nicer house. She still shopped at the same grocery store, even if people recognized her there now. And she still sang the same Spanish lullabies her mother had taught her, especially when she needed to remember where she came from. The night before, her single was supposed to go to radio. Maya sat at her new piano, playing the song that had started everything. Ave Maria would always be special to her, not because it made her famous, but because it was the bridge between the girl she used to be and the woman she was becoming. Carlos walked into the room and sat down beside her on the piano bench, just like he used to do when they were kids and she'd sing him to sleep. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "A little," Maya admitted. "But it's a good nervous, like the kind you get before something amazing is about to happen." "Mom and Dad would be so proud," Carlos said quietly. Maya felt tears building in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I think they are proud. I think they can see all of this somehow." As she played the final notes of the song that had changed her life, Maya realized that the scared girl who used to clean houses and dream impossible dreams was still there inside her. But now she was also a recording artist, a scholarship recipient, and someone who got to make music for a living. More importantly, she was proof that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest moments. Like the day a grieving teenager decided to touch the keys of a piano and sing a song her mother had taught her. Maya Rodriguez had learned that dreams don't have expiration dates, and it's never too late to become who you were meant to be.